Hey, everybody, welcome back to Becoming a Powerhouse Brand. Today's conversation is one that is going to go beyond strategy and beneath all the mindset hacks. We're going to go deeper into the identity shift and also to understand those invisible threads that are shaping who we are, how we show up as a leader. Because here is the truth when it comes to standing out online. You can't build a truly aligned brand if you are unknowingly carrying patterns that were never yours to begin with. So on today's show, we have Martine Shelley, who is a mentor, guide, and founder of the Generational Repair Pathway. Oh, I can get my words out then. Um, Martine has spent her life observing and studying the invisible threads of family dynamics, the emotional imprints, behavioural patterns, and inherited coping strategies that quietly shape our decisions, relationships, and leaderships. Martine also believes that for soul aligned women, healing isn't just about personal growth, it's the ultimate lifestyle and business strategy. So, Martine, welcome to the show. It's so lovely to have you.
Thank you. Welcome. I know I've been looking forward to having a good in-depth chat with you for a long while. So yeah, this is perfect.
Exciting. So we met on a networking call last year, I think it was, and I think the conversation that we were having, I don't know if I'm kind of going to share it on this episode. We'll see how it goes, but I know I've got generational patterns that have held me back massively that I didn't even realize until I connected with you. So it's been a real huge eye opener for me. But when we talk about invisible threads, what does that even mean? Like, of these family dynamics, these things that are holding us back in ways we didn't even realize were there. Like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Okay.
Here we go.
That's yeah, I'm like, where shall I begin the thread for this question? Let's go. So, what does that mean? I think sometimes when you're trying to talk about this subject, we're talking about a subject that quite often is invisible to people. So, I think that if we can cross this over into a space that perhaps people understand a little bit better, they can see it a little bit easier, they can feel into it. And that's just to simply look at the business models and the corporate worlds and to look at the hierarchy that we have in our business structures. Now, I've spent many years in running my own business and a few different businesses along the way. And I've spent a good number of years now really studying the online business world. And one thing that struck me at my core is that what I'm seeing being taught is what I've been studying for 40 years. And that's that the hierarchy that everybody is told to put into their business, the CEO, we're all told we must be the CEO of our business. We must have a team. We must have visibility. We must have structure, foundations, roots in our business. Because none of us, let's face it, are growing a business to thrive for just one season. We're growing our businesses to thrive for generations so the wealth can continue down. Now let's cross that over to the family structure. And instead of that being wealth following down through a family, let's say that's our mammal brain development that we're passing down through our family. So if we look at our family home, is there a CEO? Is there a visionary at the top who's got the grounded wisdom, the knowledge, the vision, the insight, the roots, the hearth, stoking the fire in the home? Do you have a CEO in your home? Keeping the home warm while us as parents are off out working doing the grunt work? And where are the children in this mix? Are they on the shop floor? Are they at home learning to be around the hearth? Are they at home learning how to grow and thrive in a family home? Or are they off somewhere else in another factory learning another role? So for me, these invisible threads, when we look at it in that just one model alone, without going into the depths of your own trauma, without going into the depths of your own silt that lives in your own system, just by looking at that one structure alone, is that there in your family home, in your generational family home? Or has that structure been stripped from your home and we're now only seeing this in the business worlds instead? So this is just one example of how
Yeah.
these threads come down through our family homes. And I think it's gives us a really good perspective of how much time, energy, effort, visibility we put into growing our businesses. Do our homes have that same kind of visibility, structure, foundations, and roots? And if they don't, we're only growing a family to last a season, not the generations. And this, for me, is the great theft. This is the theft that's been taken from our homes, and we have been systematically dismantled from within. But yet, every business you go into, this is the foundation of their business. It's the foundation of what makes them thrive. But yet, we don't have the same commitment to that structure in our homes.
I love that. Right. For someone that is listening to this that is just thinking, oh my God, I have never heard this in my life. I want to dive into we we believe because we're brought up in this society today that we have had this certain kind of childhood, we've then had this teenage stage, we've then gone into schooling and followed the society patterns and worked our way up the career ladder and done all these things, and you get to a point in your life where you're just thinking, okay, I've worked really hard all this time to get to here, what's next, kind of thing. And we're very much focused on our current life, but what we don't necessarily realize is our patterns, our beliefs, the actions we're taking, how we're behaving, everything about it is actually passed on from past generations. And it could be like, I don't even know how far back this goes, but from doing this work and understanding more about it, it's crazy. Like I was definitely a witch that was burnt at the stake. And I think it's
many of us were not. It's what we are as women. I think the witch is this wisdom that we have within.
yeah,
It is this intuition. It is that connection to our senses that's been severed. And that's what we've lost. And I think as women, we are all wise women. So yes.
yes. Yeah, I love that. But how can we, like, if you've got to a point in your life where you just think there's something missing? Because I know for me, I hit like a burnout point, and I was like, there's something in me that knows there's more available to me. And that was when I really started my journey into not just personal development, but understanding who I was, like actually understanding what my soul's purpose is and all of those different areas. And I think everyone's healing journey is going to be very different when they start doing all of this work. But for those that are maybe listening that have never even touched any form of personal development, healing, understand anything about these generational patterns, how can generational patterns follow on to how we are today?
Okay, so we can look at this in a couple of scenarios, let's say. So let's just for a moment look at the war generation, the grandfathers who went off to war. They came home shell-shocked, broken, traumatized, silent, put into institutions for their mental what do they call it, the shell shock that they were dealing with inside. And then where did they go? So the behavior patterns of our forefathers who came home from the wars, who developed drinking patterns, addictions, outbursts. Women were walking around their homes on eggshells just to try to not rise the beast and trigger them inside. So just from that one element alone, we can look at how the behavioral patterns of what we now know as PTSD and not shell shock, the trauma patterns of PTSD will follow down through a family. So your grandfather, who was suffering PTSD, deep trauma, there was not the help for them back then, but the family endured the behavior patterns that they were living within. And so as children, we learn by cause and effect. We learn by something happening and then something else happening, and that's how we learn. It's literally cause and effect. We pick up the behavioral patterns of our family. We pick up the emotional patterns of our family. And as children, this is what we learn as our way of being. So the next generation down, you've got children who are displaying PTSD symptoms, but they do not have PTSD. So this is one way in which we can see a generational thread coming down. And I think many of us can connect with that because so many of us have forefathers who were in the war, who came back, who were a different person. They were silent. They were quiet. They didn't speak. The slightest noise can trigger them off. So now let's look at this again slightly in a different kind of way. Let's look at this from And again, we're not even getting into family traumas here. This is a systemic trauma. And this next one, let's look at, you have, okay, so you have a grandma who has anorexia. And this is a true story of somebody I've worked with. You have a grandmother who has and who's dealing with anorexia. She's diagnosed with anorexia. It's impacting her mind, her body, her soul, her behavior patterns in the home, her eating patterns in the home. All these subtle little patterns get witnessed and watched by the children and the parents underneath them. And so you have this grandma who has anorexia. 2 generations down, the granddaughter is suffering with eating issues and she doesn't know why. And then she has a daughter, and her daughter is also suffering with eating issues and they don't know why. And then one day, a simple conversation was had with her mother. I don't understand. I don't understand why we're suffering with food. I don't know where it comes from. And her mother simply said, well, that's simple. It came from your grandma. She had anorexia. So they were not anorexic. The daughter and the granddaughter, they were not anorexic. But the behavior patterns, the eating patterns, the emotional patterns were picked up by the next generations. And so the consequence of that thread, that anorexia, you can still see it coming down through the family. That for her, just understanding that information, just knowing that this was not something that was her.
Yeah.
It came from before her. Within you, you know this, you feel this, and it changed everything for her moving forwards. Because now, whenever those food issues come up, the brain can't go through that same pathway anymore. It has to move through a different pathway for you to move forward. You can't use that old pathway anymore. And as for how long does this stuff go back within us? Well, epigenetically, they've shown that we carry the epigenetics of our ancestors from 6 generations before us.
Wow.
But that person sitting at the top of that 6th generation is also carrying the epigenetics of the 6 generations before. So when you talk about I was a witch burned at the stake, you feel it in
Yeah.
you. It resonates through your soul because the epigenetics of those experiences, those wounds, still lie within us. So this stuff, it filters through deeply into our souls. But just looking at how PTSD from a wartime grandfather can go down through a family and how anorexia can go down through a family shows you how this stuff works. And we've not even got into the real stuff that actually is happening in our worlds.
Oh my gosh. It's so like this is just I feel like this is going to be one of those episodes that people are going to need to listen to a couple of times to like almost hear it the first time to understand a little bit more about this and then to hear it in a
Mhm.
different way because I think for sometimes if there's something that you're hearing for the first time that it's just like whoa I've never experienced this, it's almost like
Yeah.
your brain is like not registering it at all, so you
Oh,
need to
welcome to my
re-listen.
world. I feel like that happens everywhere I go. Everyone's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then 6 months later, they'll be like, yeah, I get it now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get
yeah,
it. Because it does take time to
yeah,
sink in. It does take time to process through because we function on levels. We can hear something, and that's one thing. And then
yeah,
we can feel something, and that's another. And it can take a long time until we can see it. So,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
very much agree that this is a process of understanding this generational blueprint that we all have within us, but nobody taught us about any of this in school.
It's yeah. I feel like if we go on to that topic, we're going to go down a
No,
whole.
no, no, don't go on to the school
Let's
topic.
stay
No,
on.
no, no, that's huge.
We'll save that for another day.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say are some of the most common emotional and behavioural patterns that you see showing up in women today, like the women you work with, that are maybe unknowingly carrying from past generations?
Wow. Unfortunately, the most common thread that I see is sexual abuse.
Wow.
Unfortunately. And that there's no denying that. I cannot name a group or a course that I've run where there is not some form of sexual abuse running down through the female line.
Wow.
And that's devastating. And the shame, the pain that sits in the female body when that is something that they have suffered goes so deeply. But to understand, when we can then understand and see that line before us, that perhaps a mother was also sexually assaulted or abused, and before them that they were, it can make it feel a bit easier knowing that there's a pattern within this that you can break so that it doesn't go down to the next generation, so that you're not unknowingly still living in the behavior patterns that sit around those situations, the shame that sit around them. So unfortunately, that is a huge thread that so many women are silently carrying.
Yeah.
It deeply impacts who we are, mind, body, soul as women. So yeah, that's a huge one, unfortunately.
Wow. Wow. Is there anything that's kind of more the things that people talk about online? I know I see a lot of people like people pleasing and fear
Oh,
of being
always.
visible and all the confidence kind of stuff, the stuff that comes with like actually running a business and getting yourself out there. Because I know for a lot of the people I speak to, it's they're saying they're not confident, but actually sometimes there's a deeper
It's
thing that
always deeper. Even for myself, growing into the online space, it's always deeper. There's not a layer there's not an element of how I've grown into my business that's not been about my own personal journey. And I think sometimes, I think especially in the societies that we're raised in, we're raised to look outwards. We're blinkered, look forwards, look outwards. We're not actually in a society that allows for us to stop, to take a breath, to look inwards. But there are so many ways in which this stuff impacts us stepping into our business worlds. So one of the things for myself that I'm always checking every step along the way is what I'm doing, am I seeking something from that I don't have in my own life already? And if we are, then there's a much deeper layer at work. So, for example, I do a lot of work with female circles and with females. So I also have abandonment traumas in my past. Um, just to briefly explain, I was raised in the military and boarding school worlds, which very much strip the family at its core. But within that, you can end up with quite a lot of trauma around female friendships and around female groups and abandonment. So you can feel those abandonment wounds from in the online space so easily, or you can feel like within the friendship groups that people are forming online, you can just constantly feel that trigger, that unease, that
yeah,
intensity that's there. So for me, when I'm stepping into growing into a new area of the business, there's the internal check. Is there something within this that I'm doing that I'm seeking for myself that is not my work? And to keep that balance and check in place, no, it's not, because I have a sisterhood away from the online space. I have my safe people. I have a place where I can go and be checked, where I can go and offload. I have a space where I can do this for myself. I'm not trying to create a space online so that I can have this female sisterhood around me, because it's there in my life away from that online space. To get into the intricacies and the details of how this then impacts us in all the different ways it's quite a big subject,
yeah,
but it does filter into if you're in any element of your business, if you're stepping into it and you're feeling a discomfort or an unease, then there's something personal underneath it that you need to work your way through. And sometimes it's we can only get there by working through the experience to find out what it is that we're
yeah.
needing to seek at the end of it.
But it is something that you can almost move through. Like you say, it's using those different pathways, isn't it? So
Mhm,
it's not that you're broken and you're not going to be able to do those things. It's just like you say, uncovering where
mhm.
that even stems from. So it's more of an understanding than a diagnosis.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the process of healing, of the journey of healing yourself is very much a process of unraveling. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. If we don't resolve or even understand these generational patterns and where they come from, how can that show up in our businesses?
Well, you'll be stuck. You'll simply be stuck because you'll keep hitting the same pattern. You'll keep hitting that same brick wall. Many people, and again, it can show up in many different ways. I know people that every time they get to a point of growth, all of a sudden they become ill, and that self-sabotage comes in, and they fall back into old habits and old patterns that can keep them stuck at that place where they're at, whatever level it is they're in at their business. They were stuck around this same level of growth, and every time they almost get there, they get ill or something happens, and they're easily distracted, and they go back into old patterns of, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not good enough. I'm too much. I'm too sensitive. I'm too this. I'm too that. And so it shows up in the places where you get stuck and where you continually get to that place where in your mind you're circling around those same thoughts about yourself and about your business. So that's where it shows up, is just by being stuck.
Yeah, amazing. If you have maybe diagnosed where it's come, not diagnosed, if you've figured out where it comes from, if you've got some kind of trauma or something that's holding you back and you've now figured out where that's come from, how would you even go about like changing your mindset? How would you shift that into, okay, I'm not going to let this hold me back anymore. I'm going to move through it. Like, how would you overcome that, especially if it is something that's maybe potentially quite traumatic?
Okay, so
Is it a quick, it's not, I'm assuming it's not a quick fix. It's going to be an ongoing.
no, it's a process of deep observation and self-study, and curiosity to be able to look into it. So I'll give you an example of this because it's much easier, I think, by examples. So for 3 years, I've been studying the online business world, and it's been a fascinating process. Every part of it's been needed. Every part of it has been essential for me to move through. And last year, I went on a deep journey in the online space of creating just all the automations, the funnels, the lead magnets, the posting, the visibility, the courses, the challenges. We can keep going. The masterminds. Did all of the things. I did all of the things, all of the things. And I learned it all. And I did it by stepping into that process fully and diving into every element of it so I could feel and breathe it all within me. And then at the end of the year, and I let it all drop and sit for a moment, and I let it all, and I turned off all the automations for a little while. And I sat within myself, and then I realized I was actually quite unwell underneath, because that process had been incredibly hard on my body to move through that amount of learning, that amount of
Yeah.
growth, that amount of doing in a year. And I became quite unwell underneath it all. My liver, this is a whole other subject, but my liver, Chinese medicine, my liver had become stagnated. My bowels were struggling. And so I had to put a lot of time and effort into helping my body to recover from the silts and the sludge that it had picked up from that year of trying to do everything in this one specific way. And every time I would look to go back to trying to post on social media, to trying to step back into that process, my body said no. This is the point that we have to listen to ourselves when our
Yeah.
body is saying no. And so I went, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to listen and give it time to breathe and move. And so I did that. And then once I'd let all of that silt settle and that veil lifted and the clarity came back into my mind, I was like, okay, I see. I now need to move forward in a completely different way because none of that was aligned with me. And so now moving forward, instead of trying to fit into a model that I was taught, I'm now sitting in myself and bringing
Yeah.
myself out to the world in a way that feels right for me, in a way that doesn't cause me to have silt or weights or heaviness still within. It's free flowing now, moving forwards, and it feels much healthier within my skin. So there's so many ways in which moving forwards in the business world are going to be impacting you as a soul, you as a person. But it's having the confidence, and this is where the difficulty comes in. Because if you have a financial burden in your life, if you have a financial weight, you can keep those blinkers on, keep moving forwards, keep charging forwards because I need to fix the finances. But sometimes we need to let it all drop
Yeah.
so that we can find the clarity and what it is that we're actually wanting to do underneath all of that business stuff, tech stuff out there.
I love that. And I actually want to share one of my own experiences of doing this myself. So I did the
Mm,
same thing as you. 2024, I think it was. I got in all the rooms, I went to all the
mhm,
events, I was doing
mhm,
all the stuff, the noise. Everyone was saying, "You're everywhere, Jackie, you're smashing it, doing all this stuff." And actually, I was doing a very similar thing to you in that I was just trying, experimenting with all these different things just to feel what was
mhm,
good for me.
mhm,
And then last year, I definitely dropped it quite a lot in terms of
mhm,
getting in the spaces because I was just being more intentional with what I was doing. And I honestly, like, I fully believe everything you were just saying there about being visible in your own way and finding your own path of doing that.
mhm,
And I think it's so easy as entrepreneurs, especially as women, to hear all the noise and think, okay, I need to follow this blueprint, or I need to follow that trend, or I need to follow that strategy because
mhm,
that's the result I want. And believing that that one path that's maybe worked for somebody else is going to be the same for us. But we're all different. We are all wired differently, aren't we? And what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for everybody. And the fact that you can have that belief and trust in yourself to know, actually, this isn't aligned for me. And it's not saying anyone's wrong because what
mhm.
works for them is 100% like great, amazing. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. And equally, if you try something that doesn't work for you, it also doesn't mean you're a failure. It's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
understanding who you are and what works for you, isn't
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from my 3-year online study experiment, I guess,
it?
is that I wasn't listening to the work, the courses. I was watching the people. I was watching these incredible women who are pioneering in their fields. Within them, they have their own alchemy, which they've put into courses and structures. But if you remove that silt and you look at the person, you can see the machine in action
Yeah.
there. And so for me, actually, it was never about what I was being taught on any course. It was always watching, even though I stepped in and tried to do everything that I was being taught, it was more about watching the people and how they interact and how they bring their alchemy into the world. And so then it was a case of sitting back and going, okay, well, their alchemy works in that way because that's what it needs. But my alchemy, my intuition, I can bring that fully into this space in a way that works for me.
I love that. If there's someone listening to this now that's feeling like, okay, maybe this is why I feel held back in this thing, or maybe there is a generational thing that is showing up and I didn't even realize, what would be the very first step that they could go on to make that first move into understanding where that's come from and allowing themselves to be able to move forward?
Mm. Where could they start that? Crikey. Let's find a little example that we can use for this then. Because it's such a broad subject, isn't it? It's such a huge thing to look at. Where can just repeat that question for me again, because I'm thinking.
So if someone is listening to this and feels like, okay, they've tried this thing, they seem to be repeating this same pattern over and over again, but they're
Mhm.
just feeling stuck. They're feeling like that momentum isn't moving forward. They're not getting the results, like things just aren't working, and they're feeling like there must be something wrong with them. They must be missing something. What could be the first thing that would
Okay.
allow them to start understanding that it's not them and
Okay.
understanding maybe where it comes from that will allow them to move forward?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're in a repeated pattern in your business where you keep getting stuck, the place that you look to is not outwards. You don't look outwards at the business to go, okay, what is it that's keeping me stuck? You go, all right, let's just for a moment close my eyes to everything outside of me. Shut my eyes for a moment, take a breath inwards. What is all of this making me feel? This is making me feel really agitated. It's making me feel really stressed. It's making me feel really sad. It's making me feel really angry. It's making me feel grief. It's making me feel loss. It's making whatever it is that it's making you feel, that external world. If you keep coming up to this same problem, as humans, we're trained to look outwards and fix the external problem. Let's shut those doors and just look inwards. If you keep hitting a point where you keep getting to a point of feeling, let's say, angry. Okay, why? Why is that making me feel angry? Because I feel like I'm a failure. Okay, why does feeling like a failure make me feel angry? Where does that come from in my life? Okay, well, let's roll back. How long in my life have I been feeling angry about being a failure? Since childhood. Why have I been feeling angry since childhood about being a failure? Oh, because I tried my best in school the whole time, and all I was criticized for it and told I needed to do more. Or my parents got cross with me for not achieving an A star. And I'm angry because nobody saw me that actually I was struggling a little bit underneath, or I was doing my absolute best. And because nobody held me with that, that anger still resonates within my body, in my soul, in my mind. Where are you feeling that anger in your body? Where does that anger sit within? Where does it reside in your soul? Does it sit up in your abdomen area? At the top, at the diaphragm? Can you feel the weight and the pain of that sitting there? That's because anger lives in your liver and your gallbladder. And if you've been dealing with anger issues throughout your life, do you still have a gallbladder, or has that been removed? Because it all crosses over. Our emotions sit within our bodies, and our bodies are trying to show us all the time. But we keep looking outwards, trying to fix the external problem, rather than looking in to our minds and bodies and souls. So this is the beginning place where you would start to begin to dismantle the walls that have been put up around you in life. And that's by slowly removing the blinkers and looking within.
Oh, I got goosebumps you saying that.
Mhm.
That is so amazing. I think it's so easy in society now, isn't it, to think,
Mhm.
okay, this isn't working. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at the figures. Let's look at what I've been doing. What actions have I been taking? And like you say, looking at the external, because we're not taught at all in our entire lives until we go on this healing journey, which normally comes from a breakdown. Um, we're not taught how to look inwards, are we?
No, we're not. And that right there, you were saying about what are these threads that come from childhood, that right there is one of our biggest griefs and one of our biggest losses, is that as children, if you do not have somebody co-regulate with you, and that's why all of this nervous system work going on in the world, wonderful. But we can't miss the fundamental part of being a mammal and our development and our stages of development and our growth as human beings. And that's that we have our needs met and somebody sees us and holds us and co-regulates with us so that this anger can be moved through the body. And instead of you holding the anger in and trying to fix the outside world, someone holds you and goes, I see you, you're angry. Let it out. Ah. Once that emotion is seen and held, that's co-regulation. No mammal on earth can reach self-regulation if they've never received co-regulation. It's a biological need. So yes, all of these things, they stem and tie into these generational threads that just hide silently in our lives, quietly fraying us at the seams.
Love that. Okay, Martine, if someone has listened to this today and
And
thought,
thinking, what the
okay,
hell? I'm out of here.
someone's listened to this today, maybe even listen to it for a second time to really process it or allow it to sit. How can you help women who are feeling like, okay, I need to find out more about this. I need to understand how this is holding me back and just really connect those dots basically. How can they work with you? What is the first step?
Okay, so the grand plan after last year's chaos and the silt in the liver and the stagnation that made me really, really ill, and the process of healing that. I actually made myself quite sick from all the toxins that I released into my body at one go. But anyway, that's a whole other subject. What came from that was the fact that I have been gathering wisdom since I was 6 years old. I have a dyslexic mind, so I'm a 3D visual thinker. When I was 6, I realized that there was a break in my family's past that I was still feeling the repercussions of from that age. So within my mind, this geometry of the generational family became alive in my mind. I have been studying this for over 40 years. I've been gathering wisdom and knowledge across many different subjects and topics within it all. And the one thing that kept on burning at my soul was that if someone couldn't afford me, then they were not my ideal client. And it never felt right for me because, well, let's briefly talk about contracts. In life, we all have our own contracts that we either create with ourselves or that we come down into this earth with already. Over 20 odd years ago, I made a contract with myself, stupidly, that it seemed that I was processing and making sense of things in this world that no one else was looking at or talking about. When you grow up in a third culture outside of Western society, in boarding schools and military worlds, you grow up with a different perspective of life. And I realized after leaving those worlds and coming into normal society that what I'd been looking at and piecing together was not what most people were looking at in life. So I was then running mother and baby groups and working as a postnatal doula. And I quickly realized that what I'd been gathering was helping women heal and make sense of their lives and their souls. And I could not hide this wisdom behind a price ticket and a transaction that didn't feel right in my soul. So if anybody would like to listen to my mind's musings, the nonsense that comes out of my mind, you can join me on YouTube, The Sultry Diaries. And for a whole year, I'm doing a chapter a week where I am releasing the threads, the golden threads of life, the wisdoms, the mind's musings of my mind, bringing them out to the world for free. So if anybody wants to continue delving into any of these subjects that cover everything in life, then come and join me over there for a year, because you will learn so much just from sitting and observing and listening to the wisdom and letting it churn through your body and find settle and peace and change its perspective, because ultimately it's peace that we're all seeking in our souls. And with every thread that you unravel, with everything that makes sense in your soul, when you unravel a thread, it allows space for a little bit of peace to sink in and a little bit of freedom to find its way in to your soul. So come and find me on YouTube and come on a year-long adventure of growth and healing and understanding and matriarchal wisdom to flood it back into our family systems. Not patriarchy against matriarchy, matriarchal wisdom to bring balance into our homes.
Oh, I love that. I love that you're doing this. That is just so aligned to you. And I'm definitely going to check that out. Please do go and check out Martine's YouTube channel. I'll pop it in the show notes below so you can go and connect with her and just watch the magic and enjoy that 12-month journey. Martine, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel like I'm going to have you on again just to talk about a different topic, because there's so many things we could have talked about today. But I love how this conversation has flowed. And yeah, hopefully those of you listening to this, it's maybe giving you a few eye openers into maybe what is holding you back, how you can take that next step, and also to just start this journey into understanding where these patterns come from. Thank you so much for coming on, Martine.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.